Okay. Okay. So the sixth malacha on Shabbos is a malacha of winnowing. After the produce has been harvested, it needs to be processed, and there are a few stages in the way wheat is processed. Although in the construction of the Mishkan there was no wheat, yet according to most opinions, there was a need to in order to produce the spices that were used to dye the curtains in the temple. There were other samamonim, other different kinds of herbs that had a similar process to that of wheat. So regarding wheat, there is, first of all, a need to do what is called dash. One of the last few lessons about threshing the husks of wheat to allow the kernels of wheat to come out of the husks. But after the kernels come out of the husks, they're still not finished because the kernels are now on the ground, and they are mixed together with the husks. So in order to separate the husks from the kernels, what they did was they would take a shovel, and they would throw when they waited for a strong wind, and they would throw the husks and the kernels in the air, and this would separate the husks from the kernels. And they then would take all the husks took up more space, and they weighed lighter. They weighed less than the kernels. The kernels took up less space and weighed more. So when they threw the husks and the kernels into the air, the kernels would fall in their place while the husks would fall farther away. Nowadays, it's all done in one process in a machine called a combine, I think. But there is also, this machine does all these processes at once. But after you now have the kernels, you're still not done, because the kernels may have been divided in general from the husks, but the kernels are on the floor. So they're still mixed in with some stones, and there's still some of the husks that are still mixed together. So you have to take all of the kernels and put them out on the table, and take the stones and the remaining husks out of the kernels. That is called Beirer. That's the seventh malach. After you take all of the stones and whatever husks remain out of the kernels, you put all these kernels together into a keli, into a vessel, and then you grind the kernels to produce the flour. When you grind the kernels, so in the kernels of wheat themselves, there are different parts. There is the shell, the outermost part of the kernel, and there is the inner part of the kernel. So people who today like to eat whole wheat bread, so they take all of the flour, both the kernel that was grinded together with the shell. Even after they're grinded, there's still a noticeable difference between the kernel part and the shell part. The shell part is a little thicker, and the kernel that is now ground is thinner. So if you want to specifically have the white flour, so you take the entire grinded mixture and you put it into a zipala, you put it into a sieve to separate between the thicker husks, thicker shells, and the inner kernels of wheat, and which are all ground, but still, again, the shells of the wheat are thicker than the inner kernels, even after they're ground. So if you want to divide the inner kernels from the shells, you put them into this sieve, and there's holes in the sieve, and so they're very tiny holes. So only a fine flour comes out, and the remaining husks or shells of whatever it's called in English, I'm not sure, the outer part of the kernels remains on top. That is the malacha of meraked. So the Gemara says that it seems that all of these three processes of separation are all the same. The Gemara says, "Hainu beider, hainu zayda, hainu meraked." Whether you're throwing the husks in the air to separate the husks from the kernels, or whether you are taking the stones out of the kernels, or whether you're taking the shells through the sieve away from the fine flour through the sieve, it's all the same process of separation. So why they all count as three distinct malachas? These are three of the 39 malachas. Seemingly, they're all the same process of separation. So the Gemara asks this question. The Gemara answers, Abaye v'Rav d'Amar Tevayu. Abaye and Rav answer that Kol Davar Shehaya B'Mishkan, everything that was done in the Mishkan, even though that there are things just similar to it, whatever was done in the Mishkan is counted as a separate malach. So although they are very similar, but whatever was done in the Mishkan is counted as a separate malach. And since these were all done in the process of creating the samamonim, creating the spices, the herbs, therefore they're counted as separate malachas. There is a distinction between them, as we shall see. Boirer is separating with your hands. Zera is separating with the wind. And meraked is separating with a vessel, using a sieve. So that's what the Gemara Bavli, that's what the Babylonian Talmud says, that Boirer, Zera, meraked, they're all doing the same function of separation. But the Gemara Yerushalmi had a different take on what Zera is about what winnowing is about. The Gemara Yerushalmi says if someone would spit into the air, the wind causes his spit to divide in all different kinds of particles. So the Gemara says that's forbidden to spit into the air on Shabbos because the wind will cause everything to be separated into different pieces. Now, even though when you're spitting in the air, you're not causing any two objects to be separated, not like in an example of Zera, where you're separating the kernels from the husks. Still, the Gemara Yerushalmi interprets the malacha of Zera, it's not about separating bad from good, rather just the process of separating anything, even one item, into different particles through the wind, separating through the wind. That's what Gemara Yerushalmi says. If you separate through the wind, even though you're not causing a separation of two distinct items, it's one thing, the spit, still the Gemara Yerushalmi says that is considered a malacha of Zera. And that's also the halacha. The Alter Rebbe says clearly in Siman Shin Yutes Chav Tes, he says that you are chayiv. That means it's a biblical prohibition. You're not allowed to spit into the air. That's what the Alter Rebbe says in the laws of Shabbos. And the laws of Pesach were written before the laws of Shabbos, and there is some discrepancies perhaps between the laws of Shabbos and the laws of Pesach, and in general we go by the final ruling of the Alter Rebbe. However, it's not really clear what is called a final ruling because the Alter Rebbe did go back and again edit the laws of Pesach. So in general, although we say that the Alter Rebbe's final rulings are his final decision, it's not really possible to know in the laws of Shabbos and laws of Pesach what was actually the final ruling. But there isn't really a nafka mina. There isn't really a halachic difference between the laws of Shabbos, laws of Pesach, but there is a different phraseology that the Alter Rebbe uses laws of Pesach. Alter Rebbe says in Siman Taf Mem Vav that if somebody finds chametz on Pesach, on its yontif, and you want to get rid of the chametz, what should you do? So there are two ways to fulfill the mitzvah of destroying the chametz. One way is burning the chametz, and the other way is to take the chametz and to grind it up and throw it in the wind. and both are equally kosher when it comes to destroying the chametz. But now it's Yontif, and the question is, what do? You have chametz in your house. What do you do? So the Alter Rebbe says that there is an issue with throwing the chametz into the wind because of Zera. It's considered Zera. It's considered you're separating through wind. You're destroying through wind. It's in the category of Zera. But then he says that there are those who say that it's not an issue, and those who say that it is an issue. It's a machlekes. Doesn't say the same way he says in laws of Shabbos, where he says clearly this is forbidden, and this is biblically forbidden. Laws of Pesach, he says there's two opinions. We have to be strict according to both opinions. How are we strict according to both opinions? You can't burn the chametz. Why not? You're allowed to make a fire on Yontif to burn something which you need to burn on Yontif. Do you really need to burn the chametz? Well, if there's no other option other than to destroy the chametz, other than burning the chametz, then you will be allowed to burn the chametz. But since there's an opinion which says you could throw the chametz into the air, you could mash it up and throw it in the air. So since there is an alternative of getting rid of the chametz without burning the chametz, therefore you're not allowed to burn the chametz, because you're only allowed to burn something when you need to burn. So if you say it's forbidden to throw it into the air, so then you have no alternative. Then you should be allowed to burn the chametz. But since there's an opinion which says that's forbidden, therefore you're not allowed to burn it or to throw it in the air. Instead, you're supposed to just kaifel of kli. You're supposed to put it aside until you're able to burn it after the holiday part of Pesach and burn it in Chol Hamoed. But you cannot destroy it, or even ask a non-Jew to destroy it with Zera by throwing the chametz into the air, because it may be biblically forbidden to do Zera, and therefore you cannot say that there is no alternative other than burning the chametz, because there's an opinion which says you're allowed to throw it in the air, and you can't throw it in the air because the opinion which says that it's biblically forbidden to throw it in the air, and therefore the Alter Rebbe says to be strict according to both opinions, and therefore you are not allowed to destroy the chametz or ask a non-Jew to destroy the chametz as well. So what comes out from all this is that we have to be strict according to both opinions. The opinion which says that it is, according to Gemara Yerushalmi, which says that spitting is considered zera, and the other opinion, the Bavli, which says that Zera is about Beire. The Gemara Bavli, as the Alter writes in Kuntres Achron in Siman Tafman Vav, that the Alter is interesting. He says he quotes something that we don't have in our Shulchan Aruch in Siman Shin Yotes. It could be there's many things in the Alter Shulchan Aruch which were burned that we don't have. So it's possible this is one of the things that was burned. This could be that there is a Kuntres Achron in Siman Shin Yotes that we don't have. The Alter Rebbe says that I said in Siman Shin Yotes that the Gemara Bavli seems to disagree with the Gemara Yerushalmi. The Gemara Yerushalmi says that Zera means to to spit in the air, but the Gemara Bavli says that Boirer, Merakin, and Zera are all the same kind of thing. It's all about separation. So it seems like the Gemara Bavli disagrees with the Gemara Yerushalmi. So the Alter Rebbe practically rules like both opinions and says you're not allowed to spit into the air, and you're not allowed to destroy the chametz on Pesach with Zera by throwing it into the air either. But because of the other opinion, which says you could throw it into the air, therefore you don't have to burn it, and therefore you can't burn it either. And that's not considered a need on Yontif that could only be satisfied by burning, and therefore you can't burn the chametz either on Yontif. You have to wait till after Yontif. But this doesn't really seem pertinent to us. However, we shall see that there are many halachas ramifications that are very practical because of the malacha of Zera. There is a story of Rabbi Akiva Eger. Akiva Eger says he was a Rav in Poison. Before he was in Poison, he was in Lisa. And he says an interesting event that happened to him. He was once walking to shul, and he saw a guy who was holding this cup of water, and he was standing on the second story of a building. and from the second story of the building, he was pouring something down from the second story. He's pouring water into the air. And there was no problem of carrying on Shabbos because the whole area of the synagogue was surrounded by an Eruv. But Reb Kiva Eger said, Ola Belibi, I thought to myself that perhaps, according to the Gemara Yerushalmi, he's pouring water in the air, and the wind is causing the water to be scattered around. Perhaps this is considered to be Zoyre, according to the Gemara Yerushalmi. Reb Kiva Eger goes into the whole discussion about, perhaps he might say that since this water was spilled by a person, and therefore it's not considered the same status, it seems that Zoyra, winnowing, only applies to things that come from the earth, Duli Karka. But it's clear from the Alter Rebbe that even if it's not Duli Karka, there will be an issue. And so regarding practically, halachic ramification of this would be regarding the game of blowing bubbles. People often have their children play this game where they take a soap and they mix it with water and they put this round plastic into the water, and the kids blow the bubbles out of the plastic. So I allowed to play that game on Shabbos. So it seems like, according to the Gemara Yerushalmi, since when you blow the bubbles into the air and the wind causes the water the bubbles to move around, so that would be an issue on Shabbos to blow bubbles. There is another issue with blowing bubbles. According to other poskim, discuss that you're creating a new entity, you're creating bubbles and not just water. But leaving that issue aside, there will be another issue, it seems, according to the Gemara Yerushalmi, and that is that you are doing zayra. You're causing the water to be scattered all over the place through the wind. There is another issue, and that is, forget about the wind. Are you allowed to blow with your mouth to separate things? So the Alter Rebbe says in the laws of Hilchos Rasla Shabbata, in the Siddur, final ruling of the Alter Rebbe, in the laws of Shabbos, he mentions many stringencies there. And one of them is, he says that if a fly falls in your soup, you should not blow the fly out of the bowl. He says you could blow the fly to the end of the bowl, but then you have to spill the fly out of the bowl. Why can't you blow it out of the bowl? It doesn't say why, but it seems clear the reason why I can't blow the fly out of the bowl is because of Zayra. You're not allowed to use your breath to cause a separation of the fly from the bowl. And in a similar way, the Aruch writes, "Nafchu b'piv zeu zera." He says it clearly that blowing with your mouth is considered the same as using the wind, and that's what the Rebbeinu Chananel says, and that's what the Alter Rebbe says. The question, though, is, that's what they say. The question is that this seems what they're saying is a direct contradiction to the Gemara, to Gemara Bavli and Gemara Beitza. Daf Yud Beis, it says over there in Gemara Beitza that if somebody has separated the husks of legumes, of beans before Shabbos, and now that's still mixed up together, he's peeled them, but they're mixed together on Shabbos, and the Gemara discusses about various ways of separating them. The Gemara says that yinapeach miyad liyad, which means you hold them in your hands and you blow the husks off of the kernels, which seems to be directly direct contradiction to what the Alter Rebbe says. You're not allowed to blow. There it says in Gemara you are allowed to blow. So it's very interesting that the Alter Rebbe, when he talks about this halacha, he changes from the word yinapeach, which is in our Gemara, which means to blow, and he says instead of the word yinapeach, he says yinape, which difference between yinapeach and yinape is yinapeach means to blow. Yinape means to sift. So the Alter Rebbe says that the Gemara is not discussing blowing. Blowing is for sure forbidden, as the Aruch says. The Aruch says that blowing with your mouth is considered in the category of zera. And when it says in the Gemara that yenape miyad liyad, is not talking about blowing with your mouth. That's forbidden according to the Aruch. Rather, it's not talking about yenapeach, not talking about blowing with your lips. Rather, it's talking about shaking things with your hands and causing it to separate it that way. But the question is, where does the Alter Rebbe get this from? This is not one of the girsas in the Gemara that we have. There's not one of the texts in the Gemara that are extant. The Dikduke Seifrim, which writes all different texts in the Gemara, does not have two texts of this Gemara and Beitza. But it seems very clear that the Alter Rebbe had this other text. The Alter Rebbe does say in the laws of Yontif. The laws of Yontif are a little more lenient than the laws of Shabbos when it comes to the issue of Zera, and that's because on Yontif, you're allowed to do any malacha for the sake of food. And so therefore, Zera, which is separating the husks from the kernels, is part of the process of making food. However, there is a rabbinic prohibition of doing various malachas on Yontif that are normally done when you want to create a large quantity of food. And the reason the Chachamim forbade us to do that on Yontif is because they didn't want us to delay working to Yontif, and therefore we'd be busy all Yontif just doing malacha. And therefore the Chacham said that we're not allowed to do a lot of Zaira on Yontif. You only allowed to do what you need right away. And a lot of restrictions, although biblically, the Minat Torah, there wouldn't be an issue of separating through the process of Zaira, but still the Chachamim said not to do this because of Uvin the Choil, because it's something that you do during the weekday, and because it will keep a person might delay things to Yontif and say, oh, I have the whole Yontif to do things, and therefore the Chachamim forbade us to do extensive Zaira on Yontif. However, regarding the laws of Zaira on Yontif, the same halacha, same scenario where the guy has these kidneys. He has the beans and they're shavitim and they're separated, but they're not separated. He wants to separate them. The Alter Rebbe says there, if it's mixed together, you could blow on Yontif. So why do you say you could blow? Where does that come from? So the Alter Rebbe is using the leniency of the opinions which disagree with the Gemara Yerushalmi and say that you're allowed to blow in regards to the laws of Yontif. Since in regards to the laws of Yontif anyways, it's only a rabbinical prohibition, so the Alter Rebbe says that we're allowed to rely on this opinion regarding Yontif to allow us to blow to separate the legumes from their husks. But that's only in regards to the laws of Yontif. And the source of the Alter Rebbe is from the Aruch. The Aruch says in the Erech of Inape, he says, his text in the Gemara is, he brings both opinions, but he says, my opinion is that the correct text is not that you're allowed to blow to separate on Shabbos, rather you're only allowed to shake the vessel which has the husks in it, but not to blow. That's clearly forbidden according to the Yerushalmi. That's Zayda. So bottom line is that there, and the Alter Rebbe says it clearly in Sim Tov Kuf Yud, Siv Beis, he says there, L'nat Peach, he says you're allowed to blow. Regarding the laws of Shabbos, he says don't blow. Regarding the laws of Yontif, he says to blow. It's clear that the difference between the Hey and the Ches and the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch is not a mistake in the print, but it's very deliberate. Laws of Shabbos have one distinction, and laws of Yontif have another distinction. That's why on Shabbos, he says that since it's a biblical prohibition, we should be strict like the Gemara Yerushalmi and not use your breath to separate things. But in laws of Yontif, which is more lenient, he says you're allowed to. Okay, just a few more practical halachas that are affected by the laws of Zera. Number one, there's no problem really to use a faucet which has many holes. That's not Zera, just because it's coming many different directions out of the faucet. It's not because of the wind. There's no issue there. But it seems that there would be an issue to use a toy gun to shoot water in the air and to blow dust off of a book, or to blow confectionery sugar off of a cookie. And it seems that there would be no issue to a cold vaporizer, to put the vaporizer back on. It's not, you're not using the wind to separate the particles. The separation of the water into vapor is not because of Zayr, it's not because of the wind. Therefore, those things would be okay. And Moshe Feinstein also writes that regarding the laws of aerosol cans, of air freshener, they wouldn't be an issue either, because of the way the function of the aerosol cans are made is in a way that they're not using wind at all. However, spray paint and cans that are using, I think it's called the Venry method. Basically, scientifically, there is a way to use um, the pressure, the lower air pressure and the wind, to be able to produce the spray paint, and that's a different mechanism. And any other spray can that uses that mechanism, which involves the wind, that would be prohibited to use on Shabbos. A similar thing that would be an issue, to take the tablecloth and to spread it out into the wind, will be a problem on Shabbos. And perhaps it might be an issue to use your hands to create a wind and to cause take the tablecloth and to take the crumbs on it and to spread and to shake it out. You're causing also wind with your hands, and that may be an issue as well. Or to take paper and throw the papers in the wind to separate them on Shabbos. There is many games that have many pieces in them, and people want to play these games on Shabbos. They don't want to separate them, so they throw all the pieces around so that there shouldn't be an issue of separating them. But you have to be careful not to throw them into the air, and that would also, because that would run into the issue again of Zayr. Okay, I think that basically covers what I wanted to discuss tonight. Have a wonderful night. Sei gesund.